For 21 years, I earned my living as a writer-editor for Bloomberg Financial Markets. I have a keen interest in the meaning of words and the ways in which we use and sometimes misuse them. I've noticed in recent years how much we tend to either underestimate or overstate when we're being sarcastic. For example, if we ask someone how they are, oftentimes they'll respond, surviving. And I would suggest that anyone who owns an iPod and a DVD player is doing a whole lot better than just surviving. But the word that I've been thinking about most lately is hero. It's become customary recently for folks to refer to any man or woman in a military uniform as a hero. And I understand the reason for this. The tapestry of my generation is pierced with 58,000 holes. Men who went off and died in Vietnam. Oftentimes, their comrades who came home were not treated as well as they deserved. And some folks improperly attempt to right old wrongs by calling all military personnel heroes. Now, before some of you go off looking for a strong piece of rope, let me define what I'm talking about. Every man and woman who serves in the United States military makes a sacrifice. They endure painful separations from family and friends. They are sent to foreign lands whose culture and languages they are unfamiliar with, and far too often they're sent into harm's way. But if each of them is a hero, by what name shall we call those among us who do extraordinary things at the extreme outer edges of human ability? My father served in World War II, and the life he led prior to his military service was like something out of a Dickens novel. When my dad was 12 years old, at the most desperate point in the Depression, my grandfather died of a particularly painful form of cancer. And so my father's sleep was interrupted by his father's screams. My grandfather had been a real estate agent, and in his day, people of our class died at home. After his funeral, my grandmother went to some of the big landlords in Queens and attempted to collect commission money that my grandfather was owed. And they all told her the same thing. They couldn't pay her. They didn't have the money. But they all offered her the use of apartments until the debts were repaid. So for several years, my grandmother, my father, and my aunt moved from apartment to apartment every few months. When war broke out, my dad was working full-time during the day to help support the household and attending City College part-time at night to study accounting. He entered the Army, and for the entire time he was in Europe, nearly every day somebody was shooting at him. He never spoke about the war, and certainly not about battles or atrocities. But I've been able to piece a few things together. He was at Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, in one of the bitterest cold winters in Belgian history. His unit liberated a death camp at Landesberg in Bavaria. And I think the memories of what my father saw that day stayed with him for the rest of his life. Once when he was on leave, he traveled to Normandy, and he was able to find the grave of a high school friend who had died in the war. And my dad was able to write to that boy's parents and tell them that their son was buried in a peaceful and a beautiful place. It has been 15 years since my father breathed his soul into the hands of God, and I miss him very much. But for all of the sacrifice, all of the separation, all of the killing that he participated in and observed, if anyone had asked him if he was a hero, he would have said no, and he would have been genuinely surprised to be asked. And I understand the reason for that surprise. It's because the bar for heroism was set so much higher for his generation than for any generation that came before or since. Had his generation failed in its sacred responsibility to the cause of democracy, free men would have ceased to walk the earth, and the world would have been ruled by a madman. My father was not a hero. He was an American who saw his duty and did it. And an American who does his duty in the service of a just cause is the greatest human force for good on the face of the earth. Thank you all for coming. Honor the dead.